We've been seeing a few names of Gurudev every night, so we'll chant. Om Vibhave Namaha.
Om Vibhave Namaha.
Om Vinoda Priyaya Namaha.
Om Vinoda Priyaya Namaha.
Om Vinaya Shilaya Namaha.
Om Vinaya Shilaya Namaha.
Om Vitaragaya Namaha.
Om Vitaragaya Namaha.
Om Vedanta Vedyaya Namaha.
Om Vedanta Vidyaya Namaha.
Om Shantaya Namaha.
Om Shantaya Namaha.
Om Shanti Pradaya Namaha.
Om Shanti Pradaya Namaha.
Om Shastrodharakaya Namaha.
Om Shastrodharakaya Namaha.
Om Shuddha Sattvaya Namaha.
Om Shuddha Sattvaya Namaha.
Om Shuddha Sattvaya Namaha.
Om Shuddha Sattvaya Namaha.
Salutations to the pure one, the one who is Shuddha. So these names that we see of Gurudev, 108 of them, are names that describe Gurudev himself, his personality, and also what his very nature is. A Mahatma, what his nature is, how he carries about himself, what he stood for, how he carried about himself. And these ideals, these names, these 108 names that devotees would have come up with, are ideals that we have to try and meet. We can admire them in someone. Very much we can admire the strength of Hanumanji. We can admire the Shakti of Durga Ma. We can admire the compassion of Lord Ram. But that admirance doesn't do anything if we don't try to live up to it. Right? If we can admire honesty and then we go on lying, well, what's the point of that? That means it's not genuine within. It's not a genuine admiration. So this quality of Gurudev, Swami Chinmayananda, is Om Shuddha Sattvaya Namaha. Salutation to that one who is pure. You know, that cup of water, that glass of water, or that cup of milk is pure as is. Right? That's its natural state. If you add anything to that water, then it becomes impure. Or if you add anything to that milk, then it's no longer in its natural state. It's now panchamrit, right? It is now cranberry water, right? There's something that is added to that thing. So it's no longer in its natural state. Gurudev, you know, that purity means that anything that is added, then it changes. Nothing is added, then it stays the same. Gurudev, he was one with that identification of Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. Right? I am Brahman. I am the very nature of this existence. I am Satchit Ananda, nothing else than that. Right? I don't think I am this body. I am not Swami Chinmayananda. Right? I am not an institution. Right? I am not old. I am not young. I am not fat. I am not thin. I am Satchidananda. Those are just additions to my nature. Those are just additions to my purity that make me impure. It no longer leaves me in that natural state. So, you know, we go around, we say, yes, I know, you know, God lives within. I know I'm that divine power. You know, I'm divinity, yes. But, you know, I also got my PhD. So, you know how James Bond goes, you know, the name's Bond, James Bond. Right? We go around and we say, the name's Brahman, Dr. Brahman. Right? We add our own title to it. Right? We add something onto that identification with the, you know, or disidentification with all the unnatural things, rather than leaving just the pure thing. Brahman is that name. You know, we need to put a name and some sort of formation in our mind to what we don't understand. So we can't see gravity, but for some reason we have faith that it's there. So if I were to lift this book and drop it, it will fall. So we say, okay, fine, gravity does exist. If it's not called gravity, it's something. Something is making everything fall. Well, there's something that's allowing this entire universe to continue in that specific order that it does. That law of karma, that law of sattva is there. That guna is there. That guna sattva is allowing everything in this entire universe to occur exactly as it does in such a precise way. So we should be identified with that thing. Instead, whatever we say, yes, I am divine, Bhagwan is there, on cloud 9 with his golden gates. One day I'll reach him, okay? But for now, I am this body and I just need to eat, drink, and be merry. Or, I need to, make sure that this body is looking nice. I need to make sure I have the nicest hairdo, the nicest color in my hair, no gray, right? The nicest clothing, right? The best shape that I can be in, right? We identify with this body. And then afterwards, when we die, then we'll go to God. We don't understand God because that is not how it works. We don't understand, but we say, okay, I'll go to God. So Swami Chinmayananda, he had the perfect understanding. Yesterday a few days ago, we saw he's the Shanti Pradaya Namaha, the one who gives Shanti. How does he give peace and happiness? By giving knowledge. But not just by giving knowledge, he was Shastra Dharakaya Namaha. He uplifted those Shastras. Right? By uplifting the Shastras, he lived the Shastras. That means he has to know, he has to become one with that thing. You can't say you're a doctor by profession and you're, a mother at home or a father at home. You need to be a doctor throughout, or a mother throughout. Right? You aren't a human being when you're in front of people and a cat when you go home. Right? You identify with those teachings. You have to become one with those teachings, those Shastras. And the teachings of the Shastras is that we are just that Satchit Ananda. We are that very pure existence. So our mentality, as we go about, so how do we, figure, everything is always easier said than done. So I'm telling you, you're Satchidananda, and you say, yes, I am Satchidananda. Then you go outside and you say, gosh, my body is so cold. Or nowadays it's hot, so my body is so hot. Right? So how do we live this thing? Well, as we go about in our daily duties, we have to remember that we are first and foremost a sadhak. We are a seeker, a spiritual seeker. So I can be a wife, I can be a husband, but those come second. Your first thing is that you are a sadhak. So every situation that happens, you need to see how that is your sadhana. You need to see how that can help you. Somebody recently asked, they said, is it true? Is it true? See, we have this camera that goes and it records every night and then it gets uploaded on YouTube and it's for the archives. Right? It's for the archives, the archives that's there. So now every time when somebody walks in front, our videographer, Uncle Larry, he's there and he's telling, no, don't walk in front of the camera. But everyone's so focused on, whatever they're doing, so they don't see it. Uncle Larry is there every night. No. So anyway, I was saying, so Uncle Larry is the photographer, he's the videographer. But then he should be a sadhak as a videographer. So if it is, we have obstacles in every day, he's trying to do his job. So we're trying to do our job also. We're trying to be a mother or father and our child is rebelling. We're trying to be a student, but that work is so hard to complete. That homework is so hard to complete. So what are we supposed to do? Somebody asked recently, they said, is it true, I read somewhere, is it true that every single occurrence in this world is there for me to learn? And the answer is yes. Nothing happens by coincidence. Nothing happens by accident. That guna, that sattva, that quality is there in this entire world, ensuring that that law of karma plays out exactly how it's supposed to be. So if it is that, you're supposed to make it to a birthday party, make it to a wedding, make it to satsang, and something, you don't get a ride at the last second. You're ready, you're dressed, and you've been getting ready for 3 hours. At the last second, that car doesn't come, or you can't get a transportation. Well, that's not by any accident. There's a reason that you're not supposed to be there. Or when somebody's walking in front of the camera, for instance, then, or they're imposing, putting an obstacle in your job. What trait is there within me then that I need to overcome, that I need to deal with, so that I am no longer agitated by that thing? See, it's when you are identified as a mother instead of a sadhak, then you get very angry with your children when they do something wrong. If you are a sadhak, then you say, okay, my child is acting like that. One, well, we're both working out some karma here. And then the second thing is, okay, well, what can I do better to help that person? Because the child is your duty. So our only relationship should be as a sadhak with Bhagwan, right? I am trying to reach Bhagwan. I'm seeking for you. I want you, Bhagwan. How do I get there? And then afterwards, when you become a doctor, you become a father. See, if you go and you meditate, and meditation is that way that you can imbibe this knowledge. So once you gain this knowledge and you sit in meditation, but if you go and you sit down and meditate as a doctor, or you go and meditate as a father, then what are you thinking of? You're thinking of your patients, you're thinking of your children. But if you meditate as a sadhak, only Bhagwan is there on your mind. So Bhagwan is saying these names of Gurudev. Right now, Gurudev would have been that realized soul. He understood Bhagwan. He lived as Bhagwan allowed him to. So that name, that one who is pure, means that we have to get back to our purity. We have to get rid of, we have to get a filtration system. And we need to put our whole personality, our whole body through that filtration system, so that all that's left is Satchit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. Okay, so now we are, this 108 nights Mahajnana Yajna, we are looking at Bhagavad Gita. The entire Bhagavad Gita is being done. So we'll open with a short prayer. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatye Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramayandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. So last night we left off at chapter 16. And we were on verse 15 is where we left off. And in this chapter, Bhagwan is talking about the Asuris and he's talking about the Devik, right? The Devik qualities, those divine qualities, and then those qualities of the not so divine, right? The not so divine, the ones who are more demonic actually is what the English translation has come up to. So Bhagwan here is saying, he went through only a few verses of 26 qualities that show that, these qualities are divine. And then the rest of the chapter is about those qualities that are not so divine, that are demonic. So there's a reason for that. That's also not an accident. Bhagwan says, okay, those qualities of divinity are there in everyone. Intrinsically, we are divine, right? That is our true nature. That's our intrinsic nature. So we are divine. But unfortunately, in our impure state, we add in all these not so divine qualities. So there's a whole long list of them, because if we say, you're not good, you need to become good, go and do it. Well, what does that mean? Because every single person in this room thinks that they're good. They'll go home and they'll quarrel and they also think they're doing the right thing. Right? They'll go and they'll kill animals, they'll go and kill, they'll just for fun go and kill all the critters outside, a frog, just for fun. Children do that just for fun. They don't know that in that state, and you just do that for fun. And they think they are good. We think that we're good. But Bhagwan here is saying that these are these qualities. That means that you are not good. And it's not just if you are arrogant, then you can go and categorize in that arrogance. But that arrogance will manifest in so many different ways. That anger will manifest in so many different ways. Impatience is a manifestation of anger also. So Bhagwan is on this verse 15. So he says, what does he say? This Asuri, this one who has that demonic qualities, or this demonic quality, he says, this person thinks, I am rich and I can buy whatever I want. He says that I am born of the highest lineage. We identify with our family very much. And we say, I came from so-and-so family, my family, we say this so much, I am related to so-and-so, that's my family there. And then it would be like the prime minister or something. And then when you find out, it's some grapevine relation. My father's brother's cousin, uncle's twice removed, brother-in-law's sister, grandfather's nephew. Right? That's how, but I'm related to that family, we have so much ego with our family, our lineage. And then also Bhashyakat Sri Adi Shankaracharya, he says, okay, really that means that this person is saying, they'll say something like, I was born, my family has 7 generations of studying the Vedas. 7 not just me. I didn't study the Vedas only, but my whole family comes from that lineage of, Brahmins. So he says, okay, I'm rich, I am wealthy, I can buy whatever I want. I come from the best family, and who else could possibly be equal to me? Who else is equal to me? Nobody. Why would you even ask that question, he says. And he says, even on the spiritual path also, Bhagavan says, even on the spiritual path, they'll take that same attitude into religion and spirituality. So they'll do a yajna for what? For name and fame. And they'll give it as much money as possible to actors, people who walk around in that presence of divinity, and they'll say one thing and they'll do another. So they'll give away, because birds of a feather will flock together. Your qualities will also attract those same qualities into your life. So if it is that you talk a lot and then people around you also talk, well, you talk a lot. Right? That quality comes there. So if you say, my wife talks a lot, well, that means you really talk a lot, but you don't get a chance to, perhaps. So Bhagavan says, they only do this. Again, they give charity to all these actors, people who say something that they are, and they are not actually that person. So they give so much wealth because they have so much of money. And then from doing all that, well, it's not just I give wealth quietly. Some people will go so nicely, and they will give money, and they will support a temple or a charity or organization for their entire lives. And then only after they die, you'll find out that, they helped in this way and that way. So nicely they will give. That is selfless service. But these asuris, they give, and then they'll say, I don't talk about what I give, I don't talk. And then they'll go and tell their neighbor, I just give, $1 million to that temple down the road, but I don't want nobody to know that. I don't want nobody to know. And they'll go to the next neighbor, and they'll say, yeah, give some money down to that temple, about 2 million or so, give or take, I give. But, I don't want them to call my name in anything. I don't want nobody to know. When I give, and that's it. I don't talk about it afterwards. He's telling some other person. And then Swamiji will say that, that same person will come to him and say, Swamiji, I just give 2 million to the office there for this ashram for you to build, but I don't want you to call my name, I don't tell anybody about what I give. I didn't even want you to know, but look, I just tell you. So that, they don't just give for fun. They don't just give to give. They give so it could be a show. They want something back in return. So they get joy out of that thing. They get excessive joy out of that thing. And Bhagavan calls this person Ajnani, the one who does not know. He's so ignorant. So ignorant. Here in Trinidad, ignorant is an insult, I think. I wouldn't know. I'm a Canadian. Right? But ignorant, we know is, that person is so stupid. Or it's an insult, or when you say that word or you call someone that word, you say it with some intention of harm also. Right? But this ignorant, Bhagavan is saying, actually everybody is ignorant. If we weren't ignorant, then we wouldn't be in the samsara. If we were not ignorant, then we would have gotten moksha already. We would have been, not having to come and endure all of this sorrow. We would have realized our true nature already. So this person is a Ajnani. He is the one who is ignorant. So we will chant this, verse 16 of chapter 16. Aneka chitta vibranta,
Aneka chitta vibranta,
mohajala samavritaha,
Mohajala samavritaha,
prasakta kama bhogeshu,
Prasakta kama bhogeshu,
patanti narakeshu cha.
Patanti narakeshu cha.
So Bhagavan says, Aneka chitta vibrantaha. So they are bewildered by all of these thoughts, these same thoughts that I talked about. I am wealthy, I am prideful, or I need, this is where I get my joy from. I will give as long as I get some pride. And they'll also give only to the ones who they know they will get some recognition from. So by these thoughts, they are so bewildered by that thing. They're confused. Did I say that right? Yes, I did. Right? But they're confused, they're bewildered, they don't know what to do, meaning that they have no direction in life. They don't know what is right and what is wrong. It's because why? They live according to their own morals. They do as they want because they feel good about that. They don't pay any attention to the happiness of people around them. They pay no attention to the rules of society, the laws of the nation. They don't pay any mind to societal norms, to what is right, what is manners, what is not. They don't care. So because of that, that means that they are confused. They don't know what to do. Right? They are confused. They are unclear about their duties actually. What they're supposed to. We have the caste system and we have the ashramas in life. The caste system means if I'm more attuned to studying, then okay, I'm a Brahmin. It doesn't mean that I was born into a Brahmin family and that's how I became a Brahmin. It means that I like to study. I am more academic, so I'm of that Brahmin nature. Or I love to do business. I love to do business, or I love to get money. I like to, allow that transaction to happen. I want that to happen through me, and I'm good at it also. So then you are more of a businessman, a Vaishya. So Bhagwan says, there's these castes, and then there's these ashramas. So there's these different stages in life. So if you are in this first stage of life, this 0 to about 25 years, you are a brahmachari. You're supposed to be studying. Studying meaning not, gain the highest, the most PhDs in the world. You get the most degrees in the world. That's okay, but that will only lead you along one path. The studying Bhagwan means, this brahmachari stage is to study the shastras. You're supposed to enter that gurukula, learn from a guru. If you can't live in an ashram, then you go and you find a guru and you desire that genuine knowledge, genuinely desire that knowledge, and that guru will come to you and you'll be able to live correctly. He will give you that manual. He'll tell you, take this path which will lead you to the rest of the paths also. Right? Not this worldly knowledge, but this spiritual knowledge. And then there are different other, grihastas, that married life. And then sannyasi is what we're aiming for. Vanaprastha is in between. That's when we retire, and then we enter sannyas life. We renounce all of this. And Bhagavan is saying that these asuris, they are so unclear about any of these things. Because in each of those, there's duties attached to them. If I'm a student and I don't study, I'm not a student, I'm just someone who wastes everybody's time. I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting my parents' time, I'm wasting the teacher's time. Plus I'm wasting a whole set of money also. That's not a student. A student is one who sits and studies that thing and gets to know that thing, understand that thing. These asuris, they don't care about any of those things. They have no idea about what their duty is at all. And if they go to work, they don't do what they're supposed to do. They sleep for 7 hours and, walk around the office for 1. So it looks like they were doing something. So because they're so unclear in their duties, and that means that their actions could only be based on emotions. Right? They're not clear, they don't have any intellect, they don't have that higher thinking, that capacity. The faculty is there, but they don't have the capacity to use it. Because if it is that I am getting paid for an 8-hour job, to work for 8 hours a day, and I'm getting paid a certain amount of money, I know I'm supposed to complete that task. I'm supposed to work for those 8 hours. And if I don't work for those 8 hours, well, something's supposed to come back to me. That's why we have so much slavery in the world today, actually. If it is that we waste my time, we waste your time, we waste the boss's time, we waste all the money also, we're getting free money without doing any work. Well, you have to pay for that at some point. But these asuris, they don't believe in this law of dharma. They don't believe in reincarnation. They don't believe that Bhagwan is there also. No God. They don't believe in God also. So because they're so confused, then their actions are not based on logic and rationale. Their actions are based on emotions. When they're angry, they act rashly. When they're angry, you throw plates, you throw pots, you throw belna, you throw everything around, and you make sure you hit somebody or something. Right? Completely wrong. Then they have to go and fix that thing. Or you get so angry and you use your words. And then afterwards, you use your words to say sorry and grovel at their feet. So they act completely only on emotions. There's no logic. There's no rationale behind their actions. Children, for instance, children like to act on emotions, actually. When one little boy hits his sister, right, he gives her a tap. And then she comes crying by you and she says, he hit me. I don't know why. And then you call him, you say, come here. So, why did you hit your sister? And then you say, I don't know. And then you say, tell me, why did you hit your sister? And they say, because she took some of my ice cream. Right? Something so small like that, they act out of emotions only. So that means that we stay as a child for the rest of our lives, actually. One who acts out of emotion is just an asuri. And that accounts for the most of us. Most of us only acts out of action. So the Devic person, the one who who acts out of logic, that means that he knows, he understands this world. He understands that to get out of that emotion, he has to find the root of that anger. He has to figure out what's bothering him, and he deals with that. That could only be a defect within you, actually. Your durguna is not someone else's fault. Your negative quality is not someone else's fault. That's your fault. Right? And you have to figure out how you are defective. Unfortunately, our ego tells us, well, we are the best thing in this world. We are God's gift. This asuri thinks that also. We say we are God's gift to mankind. And without us, how would this job get done? Thank God for me. Thank God I was there, otherwise, That's what we say. So, but that's not it. We are supposed to look logically and know, right? Know exactly that this is why I feel this way. And if I deal with that thing, then I will get over it, actually. It won't become of any significance anymore. So why is it that they think like this? Because moha jala samavritaha. Moha. Moha means aviveka, actually. Viveka means know, and aviveka means that they don't know. Moha means that delusion. They are so deluded, they're entangled in that web of delusion. Completely entangled. It binds them. They can't think outside of the box. When you argue with someone and you say, this color is red, and they say, no, that's pink. You say, no, that's red. And they say, that is the color pink. Then somebody else comes and says, that's magenta. And you say, what is magenta now? But everybody, each of those three people, are so sure of their decision. They're so sure that color is red, the next one is sure that color is pink, and the next one is sure that color is magenta. And meanwhile, it's really purple. Right? We're so sure of our own thinking. That's actually attachment to thoughts. We need to realize, we need to become so aware of every subtle thought and effect in our body. We need to become so aware of how attached to a thought we are. That's why arguments happen. Right? Discussions don't happen. Arguments happen more. Because we are attached to our way of thinking, to my way of thinking. This asuri, he is deluded like anything, and he is entangled in this web. See, Arjuna was deluded. He was deluded. That whole chapter 1 and into chapter 2, he's saying that, how can you make me kill my acharya, my grandfather? And he gives a whole long, extensive list of reasons why he should not fight in that war. Reasons why he should not fight in that war. Up from, if we kill all the men in society, then how will these families grow? Or I don't want to have this bloodshot kingdom. This kingdom will only have blood on it. I don't want that thing. Or, they're just immature. Why should we lower ourselves to that level, Bhagavan Shri Krishna? Let's rise above them and walk away from this war. So his arguments are okay, right? They're logical and reasonable, but they are out of context, right? If your arm has a tumor in it, for instance, right? If your arm has a tumor, it's going to kill the rest of you. It's going to affect the rest of your body. And then that doctor says, we have to cut off your arm. And then you say, okay, fine. And then, you go into that theater. And then suddenly you remember, my arm? That doctor wants to cut off my arm with that nice tumor. That tumor didn't do anything to him. What does he want to cut that tumor out for? And then you argue with that surgeon. You say, no, I am not going through with this surgery anymore. I will not allow you to cut off my arm. I want this tumor. I am keeping it. Right? That's that type of logic. Completely out of context. Completely irrational also. So Arjuna was deluded. But then what happens? He surrenders. In chapter 2, he surrenders to Lord Krishna. In chapter 2 and also at the end of Bhagavad Gita. He says that Nasha Moha Smritir Labdhavaha. He says, after listening to Gita, my delusion is gone at the end. He says, my delusion is gone. My moha has left. My aviveka has gone. Why? Because Bhagavad Gita is not a story to listen to. Bhagavad Gita, there's so much symbolism behind it. There's teachings. Bhagwan is teaching us. 700 verses, give or take, Bhagwan speaks for. And he's teaching us. Imagine you go through all of university and you don't learn one thing. And you get your degree to become a doctor. And then that same doctor comes to do surgery on you. You will want him to do and come near you? No. So the same way Bhagwan has just taught us this Bhagavad Gita, and we listening to this thing, or Ramayana even, Ramcharitmanas, we're listening to. And then after that thing is finished, we don't learn one thing, but we go out in the world to live. And we tell people how to live also. And in our own ignorance, we listen to them. We say, yes, they are right. They know what they're talking about. So the same thing. So Bhagwan here is telling you that this is how you get out of your moha. Listen to this Bhagavad Gita. But this Asuri, he's entangled in this web of delusion. He can't get out of it. You know, a fish can't get out of that net that the fisherman throws into the water. We are that fish. We can't get out of that. So this moha, it creates a veil over our understanding. Right? Upadi. Right? It covers that understanding completely. So we can't figure out where our sorrow is rooted. We can't figure out. We think that we blame everyone else actually. Why did that person do that thing to me? You know, why did this thing break? Or, you know, this thing is not giving all the functions that the box said it would. Right? Why is this thing doing it? Meanwhile, you don't realize that the sorrow is coming from within. You know, if a spider was really a sorrowful creature, then every single person in this room would be scared of a spider or a snake. But that's not true. I like snakes. But you might not like snakes. So the sorrow or the fear is within your own mind and your own self. This Asuri can't see beyond that. He does not. He can't understand where his sorrow is rooted, so he can't get out of it. You know, it's like there's so many instances that we will know of abusive relationships. Right? In their mind, that syndrome is there, where, you know, that wife or even that husband also, it happens in relationships, where they are so physically and emotionally and mentally abused that they also don't realize that they are in an unhealthy relationship. And they can't leave that thing. When you tell them, no, come, we will help you, they say, no, no, no. It's okay, I will stay. I am happy here. So you can't figure out where the root of your sorrow is. So they stay. So the same way we can't figure out that this ignorance is the root of our sorrow, so we stay in this world. We love this samsara. This Asuri, he loves this samsara. He doesn't even want to understand or hear that there is some knowledge to be learned. He goes by his own rules. So he says, prasaktaha kama bhogeshu. So prasaktaha means that, you know, that's from that sanj. He's attached. Attached to what? Extremely attached to desire and enjoyments, kama and bhoga. He's so attached to these things. And this is what their life means. This is what his life revolves around, just enjoying and desiring everything completely. So we enjoy this world through our body. Right? It's the five senses that we enjoy this world through. We see something nice, we hear something nice, we taste something nice, we feel something nice. So we want to make sure our body is in the best condition also. You know, we take care of our body like anything, because this body is what allows us to enjoy. So when this body becomes old and unhealthy now, what do? We start to panic. We start to worry. We saw that verse. They begin to worry like anything. You know, how do I stay young? You know, how do I stay young? So what do? We go and we dye our hair. We go and we get Botox. We go and put all kind of facials. Right? We wear clothes for, 15-year-old. Right? We do all kind of things to make sure that we give the impression that we are still young. We are so attached to our body we are, because through our body we experience this world. You know, King Yayati, who is in Mahabharat, he only enjoyed this world like anything. That king, he only enjoyed this world, and he loved to enjoy. He had desires, his desires was endless, and the enjoyments was endless. And then what happened? Then he became old. And when he realized he's becoming old, he went to that Rishi and he said, Mahatma Ji, Rishi Ji, please make me young again. Please, please, please make me young again. And then that Rishi said, I can't make you young. What do you mean? I can't reverse those effects. And then he said, please, I will do anything to become young again. And the Rishi said, okay, well, I have this one mantra. You can do this one puja. If you go and you find someone who will switch your old age with their young age, with their youthfulness, then you can come back and you will become young again. So what did that king do? So obsessed with this young body he was obsessed with, that he went to his own children and he said, I will switch my old age for your young age. And you will still live happily, you'll live in this palace and you will get everything that you want, but I want your youthfulness. And then all the sons said, no, except for that young son. And so he got his young body. They went back to the Rishi and he got his young body. And so that king, he continued living. And then one day he realized that these desires were endless. There was no way he could quench his desire. It's like when you add fuel to a fire, right? So we have so many bushfires. Or in California recently, there was that fire for 6 days or something that was going and destroying all this livelihood. But when you add fuel to that fire, what does it do? It just grows and grows and grows. That fire never says, oh, okay, that's enough. I'm big enough as is. He just keeps adding fuel to that fire, and that fire keeps growing and growing and getting stronger and stronger, and it will continue until it dies out on its own. But what is it? That karma is that fire, and the enjoyments are the fuel. When we enjoy what we desire, we keep fueling our desires. And when we become attached to that enjoyment, well, then it's the cycle of samsara for us. There's no turning back after that thing. But that asuri, what does he do? He is so attached to that desire and enjoyment. He doesn't see any fault with it. If he needs 10 cell phones, he'll get 20. Right? If he needs new clothes, he will buy the whole store. If he needs one car, he will buy 6 and a bicycle. Right? He will continue obtaining and attaining as much as possible. And he won't stop at any cost. So what happens to this person? Well, where do they go? Where does this asuri go who's so attached to this desires and this enjoyments and what the world gives us? Well, patanti ashucho narake. What happens? He falls into one foul hell. Narak, that hell. Actually, they say it's that Vaitarani. Vaitarani is this, this description of hell where it's this river of blood and bones and hair and absolutely, we can't even go near a drain without plugging our nose. But this asuri who lives by these morals, or amoralness, immortality, this immortality, well, he goes straight to hell. But he doesn't go after this body drops. He's also living in a hell. When it is that we live in a hell also, we experience ups and downs. This world and this one earth also has many different lokas. That drug dealer, he's living in his own world. That pandit is living in his own world. Right? The fathers and mothers living in their own world. That CEO is living in their own world. We all have our own. And now imagine if that, that nice grandmother has to go and live in that neighborhood of drug lords. That's hell for her. Or a young woman going and living in. That's absolute hell. They're experiencing hell. Or if you have a bad day at work, then you come home. And then somebody says, how was your day? You say, I had a hellish day. It was a horrible, horrible day. We experience hell in our own lives. We don't need to go anywhere. But this asuri, right, he is the one who's so attached to these desires and enjoyments, and he can't let go of it. He can't see anything more than that, and he's living in hell, and he will also go to narak, even go lower than that. How is it that they go to hell? Right, so he's experiencing that sorrow from not getting the fulfillment of his desire. But when it is he wants something, we saw in that last verse, he will get that thing by any means. If it means he has to rob a bank, he has to kill someone, he has to hurt someone, he will get that thing by any means whatsoever. So if it is that you are not following the rules of dharma, then that means that you are incurring pap. Some kind of pap you are doing. Right? Some sort of sin. So our understanding of sin is this Western notion that, if you do this, then, you go and you pay penance, you go and you confess, and then that thing is removed. In Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma, that's not what pap is. Pap, that understanding of sin, is anything that takes you away from moksha or takes you away from your nature. So if it is that you are lying like anything, well, that's taking away from your own nature. That's taking away from your honesty. That's taking away from your peace of mind. Because when you lie once, one small white lie, you need to make sure you remember that 10 years from then. And then you keep building on that lie, and then you need to keep lying, and you have to start writing it down. And you say, what, why you didn't come satsang? Oh, I was sick. I wasn't feeling so good. When I come home from work, I was feeling, so I just went to bed and I sleep. And then, you go, so the husband will say that. And then you go to the wife. You say, you all didn't come satsang. They say, yeah, we had to go by one of his family. We had to go. It was their birthday, so we had to go and, show our face. I say, what? But you just told me that you were sick. So that thing has to keep so much agitation that will cause. So that's taking away from your peace of mind. Right? That shanti is supposed to be your innate nature. And you're being taken away from that thing. So what happens? They follow their own adharma. They have no belief in any type of dharmic system or karma system at all whatsoever. So they're committing pap all the time. Which means that they're moving farther and farther and farther away from shanti. Farther and farther and farther away from Satchit Ananda. So what happens? Well, they'll just fall lower and lower in their own personality, in their own mind. Their divinity won't even be there. Remember, Bhagwan doesn't even talk about Rakshasi anymore, and Rakshasas in this chapter. He doesn't even bother with them. Why? Because there's no use. There's no use. There's no helping them. They have to help themselves. And that's if, by Bhagwan's grace, they get the opportunity to. So they go on living in hell. They're living in hell and they go to hell. So, it's like, and I used this example yesterday also, it's like when you are a drug addict, you become so addicted to that drug and you can't get away from that thing. We see so many drug addicts or hear about them. They can't get away from that thing. Or even if they go into rehab, they try and escape. They want to go back and get that same amount in them. So Bhagwan continues in this next verse. How do they treat the practice of religion? Right? What is the practice of religion? So we'll chant verse 17. Atma sambhavita stabdha.
Atma sambhavita stabdha.
Dhanam anamadhanvitaha.
Dhanam anamadhanvitaha.
Yajante nama yajnaiste.
Yajante nama yajnaiste.
Dambena vidhi purvakam.
Dambena vidhi purvakam.
Bhagwan says, how do they treat the practice of religion? All our rituals, our practices. He says, avidhi purvakam. They have no concern with any types of rules or injunctions, nothing like that. Why? Because they're so atma sambhavitaha stabdaha. They are what? Self-conceited. They're obstinate. They're prideful. They're arrogant. They have no humility within them. They're dhana, mana, mada, anvitaha. They're full of pride and arrogance because of their wealth. Right? So, asuras, they do their own publicity. You know how, these devotees, these bhaktas, they went and they wrote the 108 names of Gurudev for Gurudev. Or, Vedidas will go and write some stuti for Bhagwan. Tulsidas ji will go and write a stuti for Hanumanji. These asuris, they go and they write their own stuti. And then they write anonymous at the bottom. And go put it in the newspaper. They write they all praise themselves. It's like they have their own Facebook and they only continue liking their own post, liking their own picture over and over and over again. They have their own page. They only think about themselves. They don't think anything is higher than them also. Shankaracharya, he says that na sadhu mihi. Sadhus do not praise this type of person. No, or any good person praises this type of person. You should also be aware of the type of person that is praising you. If Hitler is praising you, well, that's not a good thing. That means that you are some sort of maniac, genocidal killer, right? You don't care about anybody. You have your own understanding of this world, and that's correct. If the sadhus are not praising, any good person is not praising you, then what does that mean for you? But these asuris, only bad people, only people of those qualities who admire those qualities will praise those qualities, no? If it is you are arrogant and egoistic and walking around and somebody admires that, that means that they are also arrogant and prideful also. But so sadhus do not praise this type of thing. So is it a good person or a bad person that is praising? And they're incredibly endowed and filled with pride with their wealth. Right, all this money that they would have accumulated. Remember, they push everyone out of the way and they make sure that they get the most money as possible because money is what will make them happy. Obtaining all these material things in the world what will make them happy. So they have extreme pride about this money. They have extreme pride about their, name and fame, about how healthy they are. But with money you can buy anything, but you can't buy your dignity. Right? So they go about but they don't realize that they have no care for. Remember, we told that any goodness they see that as cowardly. Don't lie, just tell the truth. And they say, me? Tell the truth about that thing? No. Good Lord, no. I will rather die than be honest about that. And they start with their dishonesty or whatever it might be. Right? They don't think any good quality is worth having. So te yajante nama yagnyehi. They perform sacrifice. Right? But sacrifice, so yajna, sacrifice. But why do they do it? For name only. For name. So they do puja, they'll do yajna, they'll do some kind of religious program, but only so that their name can go down beside it. Even when the Pandit comes and does havan or come to do puja, they'll say, Panditji, just do a small thing. We don't need anything big. Come, look, we have the food set up already. People will come, Now, I think weddings used to be like 3 or 4 hours. Now it's half an hour. Right? So we tell, cut that down. We don't need to do that. And that Pandit has to cut that down half-heartedly. Right? He doesn't even have a say in that thing. So arrogant, at one point the tradition was so high that a Pandit is what he says goes. What the Guru says goes. Now the people, it's what they say goes. The Pandit has to listen to them. Right? So arrogant we become, and in Kali Yuga it gets even more worse. Remember, this Bhagavad Gita is not only applicable to Kali Yuga, this Bhagavad Gita is applicable, this classification of people is applicable to all people of all times, of all ages, of all castes, of all creed. They can be classified into these Devik, Asuric, or Rakshasa. So Bhagavan is saying that, this Asuric person, he has no observation of religious rites, no care for any rituals. That ritual we see in this, he says, Dambena, it's done out of hypocrisy, right? That yajna is done. Each religion is made up of that ritualistic portion, that mythical portion, and that philosophical portion. This ritualistic portion is a part of the religion, right? It's a part of that spirituality. It's there. But this Asuri, he has no observance of that thing. How you're supposed to say the mantra and do offerings of love. When you're offering that naivedyam, you're supposed to offer nicely that food to Bhagwan. They fling it so. They just give it. Come, eat fast. I need to go and eat now. They tell. And then they call, come and collect this prasad. Go and put it in the bag to share out fast. Right? They have no care at all whatsoever for the rules, that vidhi, those rules of any puja or ritual, that yajna that's taking place. None at all. So things are given in that certain order. And they have No observance. There's no respect for it. What they say goes. They are Bhagwan, how Brahmarpanam Brahmavid, they are Bhagwan, giving that thing to Bhagwan. So why would Bhagwan care how long this puja takes? That's their mentality. No bhav behind the thing, right? No devotion behind that offering at all whatsoever. It's like when you do a puja, you're supposed to do that thing properly. You're supposed to chant that mantra properly, offer that thing properly, do all the steps properly, finish that thing properly. But it's like, if you have to go and sew a blouse and the rules are there, and then you say, I don't want to listen to this rule, so you go and you sew your own thing. And what happens? You get a urni instead. Right? I know, because I remember we had a knitting class in school. Don't ask me why we had knitting, but we had a knitting class. So I went to knit. We're supposed to knit a scarf, because, winter. We're supposed to knit a scarf. I knit a hat, the top of a hat. Right? I didn't know what to do. I didn't bother listening. I had fun with those chopsticks. That's what I did. But so this Asuri, he has fun with puja. Right? There's no respect for that thing at all whatsoever. They don't care. They just want publicity. The reason for doing that puja is just to get name and fame. That's all. So avidhi purvakam, regardless of any injunctions. It's not done in order at all whatsoever. So now Bhagwan says that the asuras, what do? They resort, they surrender, they give themselves over. They depend upon these negative values and emotions. And why? We'll chant this, verse 18. Ahankaram balam darpam,
Ahankaram balam darpam,
kamam krodham cha samshritaha,
Kamam krodam cha samsritaha,
mamatma paradeheshu,
Mamatma paradeheshu,
pradvishanto bhyasuyakaha.
Pradvishantopyasuyakaha.
So ahankaram, balam, darpam, kanam and krodam. So these qualities are what is prevalent in that asuri, and it's us. Bhagwan is talking to us. Bhagwan said that if you have these asuri qualities, then you come back into samsara. If you have devic qualities, then you become enlightened. And where are we? We are in the samsara. We are in the cycle of birth and death. So we have some of these qualities, but we're not at that level to become so aware of them, to just observe them, leave them aside, and do the correct thing. Why? Because we have ahankaram, that egoism, that ahankara is there. That ego is there. That ego is that asuri, he takes refuge in that ego. And that ego is only really a product of avidya. Vidya means that knowledge. So avidya means that, non-knowledge, unknowledge, non-knowledge. Right? That wrong thing. That, they have their own morality rather than societal morals. So they take refuge in that ego. So what does that mean? That means that they superimpose assumed qualities upon their self. Right? So they say, I am intellectual. I am honest. I am Hindu. I am the enjoyer. I am the doer. I am the knower. Or the ego also goes the other way. The ego also says, I am stupid. Right? I am fat. I am ugly. It's that ego that speaks. Not the divinity within us, but that ego, that upadhi, that covering, because of avidya, because of ajnan, we don't know, that ignorance is telling us that we superimpose these qualities upon ourselves, and we are so convinced by this ego. We have so much shraddha in this ego as opposed to what Bhagwan is saying. Bhagwan simply says, you are not this ego, you are not this I. Right? Remove all of that. You just be. But we say, well, I don't understand what you're saying, and you probably don't know what you're talking about either, because you haven't lived my life. So, I am really a doctor. I am really this person. I am really so-and-so age. Right? And this, I am Satchidananda, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, leave that right aside. So anything after I am is ego. Right? You just are. You just be. But we say, I am so-and-so. I am this and that. So, I am Brahman is the right understanding, but we Let our ego take over. At some points, we'll remember that we are Brahman and we will just let everything, Udasina, right? We will just be so carefree with our environment, with what's going on around us. But at other times, our emotions, right? We push logic aside, our emotions take over and we say, I am stupid, I am ugly, I am not worthy, I'm not competent. Ego goes both ways. Ego doesn't just mean that, I am the best in this whole wide world. Ego also means that I don't think I am enough. So that ego, we superimpose these false assumed qualities upon us and we identify with those things. We just talked about how Gurudev disidentified with all of these things. He didn't even identify with his name also. He was just Satchit Ananda. That's pure nature we are supposed to be. So this Asuri, he has Ahankaram, he has Balam. Balam means, so he thinks he has Balam. Balam means what? Power or strength. Right? Power. Power what? Power for what? Well, not power to change the world, but rather power to hurt the world. Right? Remember, this Asuri thinks that everybody is his enemy, and he also becomes an enemy to all people, even his own family members. So this strength to hurt others, he doesn't even see it as hurting. He says he is protecting himself. He says this person needs to go. Right? If they don't go, then I will get hurt. And we can't have that because, what will this world do without me? So he uses that balam, that strength, he superimposes that strength upon himself and he says, I have the capacity to hurt this person. I'm going to use that like anything. I'm going to use that full force at them. That's actually, so that type of balam, that type of strength is endowed with kama and raga, that desire is there. That it's just fueled by desire and emotions. So that's a tamasic bala actually. Tamasic is that, inner, right? That lazy, that sloth-like, that one that we should move away from, disidentify with the most. That guna we should disidentify. So there's a difference, for instance, between the power, the bala of Ravan, and then the bala of Hanumanji. Right? They're both strong, but what kind of power did they have? Actually, that power, that balam is there in the response to it. Right? So the response to Ravan was only strong because he instilled fear in everyone. Right? That's the only reason why he was strong. He wanted to hurt others, so he instilled that fear. But Lord Hanumanji, his strength came from such a beautiful divine place. His mind was just, this world is beautiful and I want to empower this world. This world needs to realize their own divinity to lift themselves by themselves so that they can help everyone. Everyone should be helped. What do? We say this one should be helped and not him because I don't like him. You purposely avoid that person so you don't need to come in any situation where they could ask for help. In the ashram, we say that sink in the kitchen has a curse on it. Because as soon as you go to that sink, the dishes never stop coming. You're just at that sink for hours. The dishes just appear. Bhagwan just makes those dishes appear in that sink. So, some people might say, I'm not going in the kitchen now. They just finished cook. And if I go in the kitchen, I will have to go and do dishes. And when I go and do dishes, I'm not leaving there for another hour or two. So, you avoid that situation like that, I mean. So there's that strength of Ravan, there's the strength of Hanuman. And which strength do you identify with? Well, the Asuri, he identifies with that strength of Ravan. That type of strength. The strength that instills fear and hurt in everyone around him. And then that Darpam is that arrogance. So that which causes that person to transgress Dharma. And actually it's a defect of the mind. All these Durgunas are defects of the mind. We are defective toys. Right? We are defective. What do? We think that we are top-notch. We are not made in China. Right? We think that we are made somewhere, I don't know, somewhere else, Switzerland, Italy, something. So we think that we are top-notch, but that arrogance, it causes us to, that arrogant thought that we are top-notch and we are not defective causes us to transgress Dharma. The Guru doesn't know what he's talking about, I'm going to do my own thing. That Pandit doesn't know what he's talking about, I'm going to do my own thing. When the Pandit tells you to fast or to do puja for 9 days, you say, why? Bhagwan will really come and bless me? I want to eat my meat. We have a fete this weekend. I wouldn't bother with that fasting thing. So that arrogance is there. It causes you to transgress dharma, righteousness, goodness in this. Not even for the world, for you also. Right? If you listen to what the Guru tells you, what the Pandit tells you, you're the only one who benefits. The Guru isn't getting blessings. Bhagwan isn't coming and saying, yes, you gain some points for helping that person today. Come and redeem your prize on the 9th day of Navratri. Right? Bhagwan doesn't say that it's for your own good, that these rules and disciplines are there for your own helpfulness. And then kamam is that lust. But lust for man and woman, that passion is there. Remember, this Asuri thinks that this world, there's no Bhagwan, there's no God. So God didn't put these jivas into the world. What happened? Just that union between man and woman, that just happened by chance, and everything else also just happened by chance. Right? Bhagwan didn't have any role in this thing. It's all us. We did all of these things. And then that krodam, that anger. Right? Krodam, anger towards things that are undesirable. I want this thing this way and not that way. Me. I want this thing that way. When you're trying to organize some sort of project or event, everybody has their own understanding of how that thing should go. They're working towards the same goal, but everyone has their own understanding. And if those people cannot transgress that idea, go above that idea, open their minds, then all you have is just an angry team. An angry bunch of people, because a team works together actually. So an angry bunch of people at the table, because everybody wants their way. They don't want it to go any other way. That anger is there. So they go on in their actions, doing their actions, living in this world without a thought. Right? Or they think, that person is going to hurt me. Let me stop them before they can do anything. Let me get out of this before they can kick me out. So they hurt. That's their intention, that the world is against them, so let me win first. And now with all of these thoughts, what happens? Samshritaha. So resorting to these evils, resorting to these durgunas, this asuri, what? Pradvishantaha mam atma paradeheshu abhya suyakaha. So after they resort to all of these evils, they believe this is their Bible. All these durgunas. What do? And they go on hating everyone else, hating all the people, all the things that happen in this world. What happens? Well, really and truly, they're hurting themselves. If when you light a match, you burn yourself first, that match has to burn before it can light that diya. So these asuris are going around like matchsticks, and they're burning and hurting themselves first, and then hurting the people around them. And when that happens, Bhagwan, what does he say? Bhagwan says that they hurt me. They hurt Bhagwan, these asuris. Why? Because when an asuri makes it their mission to hurt everyone, and they don't think twice about hurting anyone else, then they hurt Bhagwan. Because they don't care about you see, it's like a child, a youth, a teenager, who sneaks out of their parents' house, steals the car, goes for a drive, goes into their wallet, takes out all the money, and goes on Lime whole night, and then crashes the car, and then brings the wreck home to park in the driveway, and then say, I don't know how that happened. But what is that? That person is paying no regard for the work and the effort that parent has gone through. They're doing their own thing, and how much hurt does that parent have to endure now? Bhagwan has just provided this entire universe for each and every one of us. Every single person in this world has an opportunity in this universe. Every single person. But what do we do? What does the asuri do? He chooses to completely be ungrateful, brush that thing aside, and in his arrogance, do his own thing. And by doing that, Bhagwan has just given you everything, and you're brushing all that aside or taking advantage of it. And in that, you hurt Bhagwan. If Bhagwan is all pervasive in every single person, and you're hurting that person, and in hurting that person, you're also hurting yourself, because you will become agitated. You are agitated. Then how is it that you are not hurting Bhagwan? So Bhagwan says that by hurting everyone, by being so neglectful, being so arrogant, by being so egoistic, you fail to see the divinity. You fail to see Bhagwan in each and everything in this world. And by that, you are hurting me. So So by going against dharma, these Asuri people hurt Bhagwan. And by not following the rules to treat this body well, to treat the people around you well, to treat the environment well, by not tolerating anyone who's also on that right path, by trying to pull them off of that right path, well then you're hurting all of dharma, you're hurting Bhagwan in that same thing. So what is the result of living the life of an Asuri? What happens? What's the result? What happens to him afterwards? That we will see tomorrow, as Swamiji says.